Hey, welcome back. So today we're diving into something pretty wild. We're looking at what happens when a government decides to turn an entire tropical island into a giant, real-world experiment in global trade. Yep, we're talking about Hainan.
Okay, so let's just kick things off with a thought experiment. What if you took an entire province, an island the size of a small country, and turned the whole thing into one massive duty-free zone? I mean, what would that even look like in practice?
Well, guess what? This isn't just some what-if scenario. China's actually doing it right now. They're turning their southern island of Hainan into exactly that, a huge laboratory for a totally new way of thinking about trade and investment.
All right, so how on earth does something like this even work? An entire island as a free trade port? Let's break down the mechanics, because it all comes down to this idea of a closed customs area. Closed customs area sounds a bit technical, right? But it's actually pretty simple. Just imagine Hainan has its own special border, totally separate from mainland China. So goods from all over the world can pour onto the island with basically minimal hassle and minimal red tape. That's piece number one of the puzzle. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's a magic number, and that number is 30%. You gotta remember this one, because it's the key that unlocks the door to the entire mainland Chinese market. It's a huge deal.
And here's the journey, laid out step by step. So, step 1, goods come in from overseas, easy peasy. Step 2, companies on Hainan get to work on them, processing, manufacturing, you name it, as long as they add at least 30% of the product's value right there on the island. And then, step 3, this is the magic part. That final product can now be shipped into the rest of China completely, and I mean completely, tariff-free. For global companies, that is a massive, massive incentive. Okay, so that's the how it works. But now for the really big question. Why? Why is Beijing going through all of this trouble and launching this massive experiment right now? Well, it all ties into their bigger global ambitions. And here are the big reasons why. Look, China's economy isn't growing as fast as it used to, and foreign investment has been, well, kind of weak. So they're looking for a new spark. At the same time, they really want to signal to the world that they're still open for business. Hainan is basically a giant billboard saying, we're serious about free trade. And it's also a testing ground for reforms they might need to join some huge international trade pacts. And the bait they're using to lure in foreign companies is pretty tempting. It's not just about making stuff. The real goal is to open up service sectors, things like finance, tech, healthcare, that are usually pretty restricted in the rest of China. And of course, they're throwing in lower taxes and way less bureaucracy to sweeten the deal. Now, you can't talk about a special economic hub in this region without the elephant in the room, right? Hong Kong. So the big question is, how does this shiny new experiment in Hainan actually stack up against the long-established giant? Well, for starters, let's just talk sheer size. This chart says it all. I mean, Hainan's economy is nothing to sneeze at, over $100 billion. But then you look at Hong Kong, and yeah, it's just on a completely different level. It's a good reminder that even with all this ambition, Hainan has a long, long way to go. But honestly, the size isn't even the biggest difference. It's the whole philosophy of openness. Hainan is what you'd call managed liberalization. Think of it like a perfectly manicured garden where Beijing decides exactly what gets planted and where. It's very controlled. Hong Kong, on the other hand, is more like an old-growth forest. Its openness is built on decades of deep roots in things like common law and international finance. It grew organically. So, what's the takeaway here? What we're looking at with Hainan is really a test for the entire nation. It's this one island that's trying to balance this incredible, massive potential with, let's be honest, a lot of skepticism from the rest of the world. All right, so let's get down to the brass tacks, promise versus reality. On the one hand, the promise is huge. We're talking about a brand new hub that could totally shake up supply chains and give a massive boost to key industries. But then there's the reality. Hainan just doesn't have that deep-seated, robust legal and financial system that makes global businesses trust a place like Hong Kong. And at the end of the day, international partners aren't just looking at one special island. They're judging China on what happens nationwide. Which brings us to the final crucial question. Is Hainan the actual blueprint for China's economic future? Is this a model we're going to see rolled out everywhere else? Or is it just a really interesting but ultimately contained island experiment? How that question gets answered, well, that's going to have a huge impact on global trade for years to come.